Now we're going to BuzzFeed News. D.C. Bureau Chief John Stanton, another friend of the show. How are you?
Hey, what's going on, you guys?
Let's start with this issue of the big fight here and the timing. I was down on the Hill this morning. Obviously, there's plenty of interest in this and plenty of anger from Republicans, and yet that anger might reflect that on the pure politics, which is where I want to start with you, John. This is good timing if the White House is ever going to do something like this. And an argument we've heard from administration officials is, we have the authority. Yeah, we know they don't like it. But now the Republicans are going to be tested because this is the beginning of the new period after they've won the election, and they're going to have to show whether they're ready to govern or they just want to continue to focus on overheated rhetoric and what we're hearing, as Crystal mentioned from Senator Cruz, which is overheated obstruction.
Yeah, you know, I think the White House has basically made the decision that nothing was going to happen next year on pretty much anything anyway. You know, maybe a few nominations might get through, maybe fund the government, but anything of significance wasn't going to get done, that they started seeing no real room to work with Republicans. I think that they're very skeptical that John Boehner is going to be able to move his caucus to a more of a center position where they're willing to compromise with Democrats in the White House on any kind of fundamental issues. And so they figured this is a good time to get this out of the way. It keeps them, you know, the small bits of this thing that could be defunded, frankly, they can get done now in terms of, you know, writing the rules and all that. And so I think that they think you might as well just do it now if you're going to do it, as opposed to waiting until next year.
So, John, tomorrow night, the Emperor will announce his new plan on immigration, and it is a big one from what we hear, expanding DACA, deferring deportation for over 3 million undocumented Americans, refocusing 12,000 immigration agents. This, even though NBC News Wall Street Journal polling says a majority of Americans do not want the president taking executive action on this. But I got to think, this is the point in the presidency when the president says, hey, look, I'm here now for my legacy, to burnish my legacy. I can't be worried about polls. I'm worried about history now. And he does not want to go down as the deporter-in-chief. He hates that nickname. He wants to do something to reform immigration.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what is most at the forefront of the administration's minds at this point is his legacy and what it's going to look like after this. And when you see this through that lens, it makes a lot of sense, frankly. You know, that they don't think they're going to get anything done over the next 2 years. They've just lost a bad, you know, midterm election. There's not a lot of other things on the domestic front that he can, frankly, do. And immigration is one of them. And he's lost a lot of ground with the Latino community over the last year and a half when, you know, he made all these promises he was going to be able to get a bill done. He wasn't able to, and then he's sort of been stringing them along a little bit in the hopes of not losing the election as badly as they did over the summer on this DACA change. And so I think you're right. This is definitely, you know, a long-term legacy project on his part.
And John, when it comes to giving people a pathway, majority of Americans support, if you look at the most recent polls, 57% support that. But then when you tell them that a pathway would also require raising taxes, a fine, passing security background checks, among a number of other things, it jumps to 74%, which is why, as you know, the business community within the Republican Party supports this because they know it would do a lot for our economy. Why are we not talking more about this? Why is President Obama not talking about this? There seems to be a disconnect where not everyone fully understands what it means to have a full pathway.
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people have, the Republicans, I think, have done a good job of making it about this notion of we have to secure the border first before we even start talking about that. And I think, you know, as Luke said, the problem is that there's not really a good definition of what securing the border is. People have this sort of nebulous notion of no one getting through or almost nobody getting through, when that's probably not a realistic goal. And for anybody that is opposing, you know, a pathway to citizenship for whatever reason, creating that as sort of a straw man and say, well, until the border is totally controlled, that we shouldn't do this. It's a great prop to have, frankly. And I think that's taken away from the discussion of this. And given the fact that there's, you know, no chance of legislation for 3 or 4 years probably, you know, a pathway is not realistic.
Yeah. And John, I mean, we saw a lot of momentum in favor of immigration reform. I think a lot of folks thought that we would have comprehensive immigration reform after Republicans lost so big with Latino voters in 2012. And yet, while a comprehensive reform bill passed through the Senate, Obviously, nothing happened in the House. And the calculation at that point was, you know what, there are enough Republicans there that even while a majority wouldn't vote for that bill, if John Boehner just brought it to the floor and was willing to pass it with a mix of some Republicans and Democrats, it would pass. Has that calculation changed? Have the politics of immigration reform, has it become less popular within the Republican caucus, or does that level of support still subsist there?
I think it's definitely still is there. The problem is that outside groups like Heritage Action and others, as well as sort of talk radio networks in the states, have done an excellent job of putting the fear of God into Republican members. And so there are lots of Republicans in the House that if they were left up to their own devices and no one was paying attention, they would vote for something like the Senate bill. But given the fact that they're going to have to face a primary in and you know, there is this very hard opposition within the sort of base of the Republican Party to it, and this very well organized opposition on the radio waves and on the internet, that, you know, they feel like they just can't be out there publicly voting for it. I think that's been the same since 2012. You know, that has not really changed at all.
If only they could do their jobs in secret, they might be able to do their job.
Oh, now there's a suggestion.
John Stanton, thank you, as always, for joining us here in Washington. And as John knows, Washington is frozen.